Hi everyone, and welcome to another family-friendly vegan gains video, and today we will ask and answer the question, what is the best type of what is the best type of cardio? So I've been getting this question a lot lately, and I guess it's because summer's coming, everybody wants, abs to impress the girls at the beach, whatever. And I've been getting a lot of questions revolving around cardio, what type of cardio is the best, how much cardio should I do, should I cycle, should I run, should I swim, and I thought I'd just, do this video today to answer some of these questions. So first of all, why are we doing cardio? So if your goal is to just lose weight, look better, improve your overall body composition, get lean, get abs, well, the purpose of cardio in this context is just to increase energy expenditure so that it's easier to maintain a caloric deficit or to increase your caloric deficit in order to lose weight faster. So with that in mind, any type of cardio will meet that goal. Any type of cardio will increase your energy expenditure, making it easier to maintain a caloric deficit or increase your caloric deficit to accelerate weight loss. So, if you really wanted to, you can just do anything. You could do running, cycling, which is what I'm doing here, swimming, soccer, hockey, baseball, MMA, whatever. All of those things are going to increase energy expenditure. Now, just because any type of cardio will help you lose weight, that doesn't mean any type of cardio is ideal for your training goals. Again, the goal here is to improve overall body composition, not just lose weight. You can lose weight by losing body fat, which is good, but you can also lose weight by losing muscle mass, which is something we want to avoid, and this is a very common problem when people start dieting. They end up losing muscle mass. Now, one thing we can do to avoid this, to prevent this from happening, is to do very high volume weight training. High volume weight training, it's great for building muscle, hypertrophy, and in order to ensure that we can train with a very high volume in the weight room, is to reduce the amount of fatigue we accumulate. So any type of training will accumulate fatigue, and your body can only handle so much fatigue. So weight training, that will generate fatigue. Cardio, that will generate fatigue. Now, obviously, if you want to maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass while dieting, you're going to want to ensure that you don't accumulate so much fatigue that it ends up interfering with your weight training. If you do cardio that's very, very fatiguing, then you're just not going to be able to train with a high enough volume in the weight room to ensure that you maintain or even build muscle mass. So this means, doing very fast jogging, sprinting, running upstairs, HIIT training, very fast, intense cycling, MMA, boxing, these types of cardio that are very anaerobic, very high intensity and fatiguing, they're of course going to generate the most amount of fatigue, and if you spend too much time, doing these very fatiguing forms of cardio, well, then that's going to accumulate a lot of fatigue, and it's probably going to end up interfering with your weight training, and then you're going to end up losing muscle mass. So again, remember, the goal here isn't necessarily to improve our sports performance, it's to lose weight. And any type of cardio will increase our energy expenditure, which will allow us to maintain a caloric deficit or increase our caloric deficit. So if we want to avoid accumulating fatigue so that we can train in the gym with a very high volume, then it just makes a lot more sense to do low-intensity cardio. So walking at a brisk pace, cycling, again, at a brisk pace, not too intense, not just going all out, balls to the wall. Maybe swimming can be okay if you're not really pushing yourself. So these types of cardio, in my opinion, would be ideal because you're getting the benefit of increasing energy expenditure, which is the only real reason we're doing cardio in the first place, if the goal is weight loss. and it generates a hell of a lot less fatigue, meaning we can train in the gym with a much higher volume, which will allow us to maintain or build muscle mass while dieting. So, in my opinion, if your only principal goal is your only goal or principal goal is to just improve your overall body composition, maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass, and lose body fat, low-intensity cardio is a better option. Now, there are two other things to consider here: training adherence and diet adherence. So really, at the end of the day, a diet or training routine will only work if you can adhere to it. And I would argue that low-intensity cardio definitely gives you a benefit with training adherence and diet adherence. For one thing, I think it's just a lot easier to do low-intensity cardio. It's a lot easier to just get up in the morning and force yourself to do 30 minutes or an hour of walking or, lower intensity cycling than it is to force yourself when you're tired and hungry and not in a great mood to do very, very high intensity activity where you have to really push yourself. So I think, in my opinion, it's easier to adhere to a cardio routine where the vast majority of your cardio is going to be a relatively low intensity, where even if you are in a kind of low energy mood, you're not that motivated, it's just easier to get out of bed and just do some walking, some light cycling, as opposed to doing something like high intensity interval training where you're really pushing yourself to the max. So I'd say for most people, low-intensity cardio is going to be better for training adherence. It's just going to be easier to adhere to that training routine. But you do have to consider individual differences. Some people really, really do hate doing low-intensity cardio, and they'd rather do high-intensity training. And if that's the case, then I'd say for those people, you do have to consider adherence. If it's just easier for you to adhere to a high-intensity cardio routine, then the majority of your cardio probably should be high intensity. But you should recognize that there are going to be drawbacks to that. It is going to accumulate more fatigue, which will result in you just being able to, not do as much volume in the weight room. Cardio can also affect appetite, and this is another thing you're going to want to consider when you're choosing, what type of cardio to do. So I would say in general, I would give the benefit here to low-intensity cardio. Low-intensity cardio is not going to affect your appetite as much as high-intensity cardio, and I will say this can be very individual, but I'd say in general, low-intensity cardio isn't going to drive up your appetite as much as high-intensity cardio, so things like HIIT training. But again, this is very individual. Some people, like me included, doing low-intensity cardio does not increase my appetite. I don't get any hungrier after doing a 30-minute or an hour-long walk or a 30-minute, hour-long bicycle ride that's, at a low intensity. But if I do HIIT training for, 10, 15 minutes where for half of that time I'm doing balls-out sprinting, that actually really, really drives up my appetite. It seems that any high-intensity type of training, weight training included, it seems to drive up appetite for your average person. But there are the exceptions. Some people, after doing really high-intensity training, they actually lose appetite. So again, you do have to consider individual differences here. If you're a person who, gets really, really, really hungry after doing, a 30-minute or an hour-long bicycle ride at a low intensity, but if you do HIIT training, you have no appetite after that, then again, chances are for you specifically, you're going to want to focus on high-intensity types of cardio, because you do have to consider the effect that cardio has on your appetite. And lastly, I wanted to cover what type of cardio you should do. So should you do cycling, which is what I'm doing here? Should you do jogging, swimming, kickboxing, and how much of it should you do? So when choosing what type of cardio to do, you should keep some of these training principles in mind, like specificity, what are your training goals, what are your individual differences. So like I mentioned before, low intensity cardio is going to allow you to do weight training with a higher volume. It's going to make it much easier to maintain muscle mass and lose body fat just because it's less fatiguing, and it also just achieves the same goal of increasing energy expenditure. So with that in mind, that is going to limit some of your options. So if you're going to want to gravitate towards lower intensity forms of cardio, well, then chances are something like kickboxing or MMA isn't going to be ideal for you, and you're going to want to gravitate towards things like cycling, jogging, walking, swimming, things where you can basically, adjust your pace as needed. But keep individual differences in mind. If you really just can't stand cycling, it's boring for you, it makes it very hard to adhere to training, but you absolutely love kickboxing or MMA or sprinting, then that's the type of cardio you should probably do. But you should also keep in mind it might not necessarily be ideal for your training goals. And how much of it should you do? Again, this is going to come down to individual differences, individual needs. If you're someone who sits on his ass almost all day long, then you might want to do more cardio to increase energy expenditure because you're not burning much, you're not using much energy by just sitting on the couch all day. But if you have a very active job, you're like a construction worker, then you might not need to do any cardio. You also have to consider how fatiguing your cardio is and whether or not it's really going to impact your weight training. So obviously, if the type of cardio you prefer to do is very high intensity, then you're probably going to want to do less of it, and you're going to want to adjust how much you do based on how much volume you're able to perform in the gym. So I hope that answered most of your questions on cardio. If you have any other questions, then leave it in the comment section down below. I'd be more than happy to answer, and I also live stream almost every day. So if you have any more questions about cardio, then you can always ask me during my live streams. And as always, keep making those vegan and cardio gains.
What a relief! When will this poisonous product cease? This is another public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin now with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and how